Let's get real. Welcome to TBC Today. This podcast features friends in and around the Triad Baptist Church community. Hear encouraging real-life stories from our weekly guests and inspiring insights from our host, Pastor Rob. To learn more about Triad Baptist Church in Kernersville, North Carolina, visit us online at tbcnow.org.
Hey, welcome to another episode of TBC Today. We're excited to have a conversation today with Mark Stewart. Mark's been a member at Triad for you and your wife for about 5 years, I think. And so we're going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about book writing. We're going to talk about bullying. We're going to talk about career changes. And so, Pastor Rob, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's get real.
Let's get real. All right, we're going to turn the timer over and we're going to get going here. The sands of time. Mark, it is so good to have you here today. We're glad that you could be a part. You've been at our church for 5 years, as was mentioned. But, you know, really the interest I had in you originally was kind of some of the experiences you had growing up and then how that really steered your life and then how that affected your life and the struggles you had. So I think one of the easiest ways to get going here is why don't you just start telling us your story.
Okay, and I'm going to try and keep it a little short, which for me is not easy. I have a tendency to talk a lot. I grew up in a very small town in the southern part of Illinois, and people think of Illinois, they think of Chicago. We're talking the other end of the state, very rural, and you want to describe southern Illinois, it's corn, soybean, cow. Pretty much that's where I grew up, 350 people. And I was imported from another town to that little town in third grade. Did not fit in, especially being ADHD. I was very small as a kid. I was the smallest in the class. And immediately, pretty much shortly after I got there, the bullying started. But it wasn't until it hit middle school that it really ramped up. And for a while, it was weakling, excuse the language, but fag. I mean, you know, and then just constant. And then when I hit high school, there was one school for the entire county. We had 400 students for the entire county. And some of the middle school bullies from different schools got together and kind of formed a clique. And I was one of the ones that was really singled out for bullying. My last name is Stewart. They called me Sewer and Sewage. And the physical abuse went with it. In fact, one of the worst things they did was they had gotten me trained almost like a dog. They would walk by me and one of them would raise their hand like this. And if I ducked, they would run their finger through their hand like they were combing their hair and laugh, which made me feel like a coward because I didn't fight back. If I tried to fight back, they would then hit me. And if I started to fight back against one of them, there would be other bullies around. And I was small on top of it. I weighed 120 pounds at graduate high school.
So like as a kid, like I know in my situation, my best friend's brother made us lift weights because if we were picked on, he was going to toughen us up. What was your strategy?
Really didn't have one. I was alone. I was an only child. And eventually, for a while, I tried fighting back, but I just didn't seem to do any good. I would feel like I was always outmatched, outsized. I was physically awkward as a kid. Which is funny because I played tennis and I'm looked to as one of the better players sometimes. I just really struggled. So I ended up eventually just kind of closing in on myself. It happened in my freshman year when they pushed me too far and they had cornered me in the shower after a PE class. And they were just popping me with wet towels just from all sides. And I'm over there naked, just in a corner, just shaking. And I finally broke free enough to go get dressed real quick. Run up the stairs and I'm just covered in red welts. I mean, it was just awful. And I just the humiliation and the shame, and you swallow it and you turn it inwards no matter how much you don't want to. You turn that inwards and you start blaming yourself for not finding a way to stop it. And finally something in me shut down.
So you beat up yourself, like you just say,
Yes.
You're no good, you're worthless.
Because that's what they told me. And you start believing it. You know, eventually if you get told day after day after day that you're worthless, that they literally told me nobody's ever going to love you. You'll never have any friends. I mean, when they tell you that over and over, you start to swallow it. You start to believe it.
And you didn't have any friends then?
I didn't.
And so
I was alone.
When you say shut down, what do you mean?
If you saw me in high school, okay, you guys know me. I'm head up, smile, love people, love to talk. If you saw me in high school, head down, talk fast, walk fast, don't talk. Because that meant the less attention I gathered to myself, the less punishment. So I literally walked from as soon as class would end, put head down, walk just as fast as I can possibly walk, find a hole somewhere between lockers and hide. Run to the next class. That was my life.
Did you attend church at that time? Were you a believer at that time? Or
My mom had attended church off and on growing up, and it wasn't till my sophomore year in high school that she finally really started attending a church. And it was in a different town.
Okay.
Nobody knew me there, so that was kind of my outlet. That was my.
So you didn't really have a church family
No.
support system growing up.
I had very little support system,
Yeah.
and I couldn't tell my parents because I had told my dad in 5th grade at one point, and he went and threatened to kick the principal's butt. Not using those terms. He was a lot more vocal than that. And all they did was increase the bullying because then they waited till no one was around and retaliated against me.
Yeah, I know you brought that out in your book where you
Yeah.
talk about how they isolate you and they're fine when the adults are around, but then as soon as they're gone. And can you tell us an incident like that you had that really comes to your mind?
Yeah, for example, in my freshman year, I finally, they had pushed me and hit me and shoved me and slapped me one day just to the point that I couldn't take it anymore. And I went to the principal's office. And they called all of these in. There's like 5 of them. They called them in the room. It's their word against mine. And this is back in the day. They didn't take bullying as seriously as they do now. And literally, they walked out laughing with just no repercussions at all. I am mildly claustrophobic. They know that. So they pulled me away from the corner where nobody could see me. One of them punched me in the stomach a couple times. And then while I'm doubled over, they shoved me in a locker and closed the locker for the entire lunch hour. And being claustrophobic and closing this little when I came out after just screaming and hitting the locker, and they made sure it was where nobody would know, I'm just drenched in sweat. I basically had a panic attack. And that just made them happy to see me, that way the rest of the day, and just walking around shaking and covered in sweat and looking like an idiot. And just, it's hard to explain, just kind of like child abuse. It's very similar, the kind of effects it has. You eventually start believing what they tell you. You start living what they tell you. And I ended up doing that and just surviving. And I literally would almost throw up when the bus would pull in. I would start getting nauseous as the bus would come to the bus stop. By the time we got to school, I was fighting not throwing up every single day. And I just survived. I did anything I could to survive. I tried to be invisible. There was one kid that would just walk behind me and shove me down the stairs. And I'd tumble down 3 or 4 stairs, and then I would just go up in a ball, and multiple kids would kick me as they walked by. And they're laughing, and just the worst one though was the girls. Girls can be mean. I remember there was one girl that I really thought was pretty, and I walked by. I was just looking at her because I just kind of thought she was really pretty. And one of the other girls yelled out real loud, "Hey, how do you go with sewer?" And she just laughed, and they walked away just laughing and talking really loud so I can hear it about how gross it would be to go out with me. And they did that enough that by the time I got out of school, I didn't think a woman would ever have anything to do with me either. My romantic, outlook was just gone. And then out of that, the reason I wrote the book is because there's a lot of people trying to stop bullying in schools. And there are some strategies that work to a point, but there's also a lot that don't work, and they've had a lot of more failures than they've had successes. You aren't going to change human nature. God gave us free will. We have a sin nature. People, and the ones that do the bullying, people think are going to be the poor kid, the bad. No, it's the ones that are popular. And they use bullying, and they get other ones right under them. They call them bully victims that don't want to bully, but they're afraid of becoming victims themselves, so they join in the bully. And that social clout gives them power. And it's usually the popular ones and the ones that everybody thinks would, be the really great kids that are often the gang leaders. They're the ones who push and just, they use that to gain their own social power.
So it's a double life. In front of adults, I'm this great kid, and then in the real world, I'm in almost like a mafia.
Yeah, there is a definite stratification in class list within high schools, as most people know.
Were there others being bullied as well? Did you have friends or people who were being picked on?
There were a couple of others, but we were isolated, and I never seemed to connect with any of them. I just felt very much alone. And the reason I wrote this is because, like I said, people are trying to stop bullying in schools. But what happens after you leave? What happens after you graduate from high school? And now you're trying to go to college, and you've got all these new social norms, but you didn't ever get the chance to develop yourself. And you have all this anger and self-loathing, and trust me, it's like a bubbling black tar inside. It eats you up. And that is your life. It consumes you. And I graduated from high school. I went to a community college that was close by, I made it through that okay. But I just made it. I was just constantly angry, just self-loathing was just eating me up. And then I went to SIU Carbondale, and I wasn't dedicated enough to really survive college because I wasn't dedicated to the grades. All I wanted was to make a bunch of money and come rub it in their faces. That was my goal. And hatred is not something that you can sustain long term and really motivate you to accomplish anything. And I flunked out because I wasn't going to class. I was too busy I turned 21 and I was drinking, and I was the little guy who would go to the bar, find the biggest guy in the bar after I got a few drinks in me, and go start a fight. And God had his hand on me because I didn't get really seriously hurt or seriously hurt anyone else. I had my share of fights, but I also got kicked out of a lot of bars. And eventually people wouldn't hang out with me that had started hanging out with me because I'd started making friends now that I'm away from all that. But I lost those friends just as quick as I made them because of my anger. So I ended up being pretty much alone again. And after I flunked out, I moved to Chicago for a couple of years with one of the few people that did hang out with me some, not in school, but outside of school. He would hang out with me because he was a tennis player. There's one tennis court in the entire town. And we would play tennis when no one else was around, but he wouldn't admit he knew me in school. Well, I went and lived with him in Chicago because he was living up there for a couple of years, and I came back home because I just wanted something different, and there was a company that was supposed to give me this great job. I get there, they go out of business. Now I have no job. I'm living at home with my parents. And then I went in the military. And
Well, do you, like when you're living alone with your parents, do you feel like I'm a complete
yeah,
failure now?
I'm just, what do I do now?
Do you want to take your life or anything?
Not yet. I'm just still angry, and I'm still blaming everybody else. Even though I had all the self-loathing, most of my anger is outwardly
So it had an
projected.
energy to keep moving.
Exactly. It was just, I got to do something. So I signed up for the Air Force. During basic training, I pulled a muscle in my back, and they said, and I sat out what they call casual for a couple of weeks while they evaluated me, and they said, you've got a choice. You can either leave the military or you can go back to day one and start basic all over again. And I was still a mess. And I said, I'm just going home. So now I go home. I failed in college. I can't even make it in the military. I get kicked out of the military. And everything started really going downhill. I started really getting into it with my parents. I got a job I'm a hard worker.
How old are you now? How old are you?
I'm 23 at the time.
Okay.
And I'm a hard worker. I mean, I grew up baling hay for farmers in the area. I knew how to work, and I used that to at least get a seasonal job at Kmart. And my parents said, we want you out. They just couldn't deal with me anymore. They didn't know what was wrong. They just knew I had all this anger, and just anytime somebody even talked to me, I had a chip 5 miles high and just daring somebody to knock off. I walked around like a pit bull with a bad attitude. Just like this all the time, just daring somebody to say something wrong to me. And I would punish people. It may not, sometimes it was physically, if it was guys, I would physically hit them. If it was girls, I would just make them feel this big. I knew how to do it. I was very good at it. Unfortunately, I was very good at it. And then after coming out of the military and my parents and everything, I didn't have much money. So I got a room in a house where they rented out to just men only. It was a second floor, shared bathroom, no kitchen. And then I lost that seasonal job, and I'm about to be homeless because I don't even have enough for the next week's rent. Mm-hmm. And that's when I said, I've just had enough. And it wasn't, people talk about suicide out of anger and self-pity. No, I was just so tired of being a drain on the world. I thought I was going to do the world a favor, and I'm leaving. I didn't tell anybody. All I did was write a parent note to my parents because I didn't want them to know that, I want to know it wasn't their fault. They tried to do their best. They didn't understand what I was going through. I kept it from them. I hid the bruises every time I could. And I had a lot of bruises, but I was also a klutz. I could hide it. I just wanted them to know it wasn't their fault. And then I got a hold of some sleeping pills. It was a pretty full bottle. Had friends, a few friends I'd made. And they knew I struggled to sleep, and I get the sleeping pills. And I was going to take them all along with a full bottle of alcohol. And I knew where I was in that one room, nobody would find me for a few days. And so nobody would come in to save me. And that afternoon, I had been working part-time also for a photographer in the area, kind of learning photography. And there was a message on his answering machine when I went to the little place that he had. And it was my mom's friend, Bob. His name was Bob Bunny. He's always been very kind to me. Some of the adults were. He was very kind to me. And he was asking me to go to church that night. They were having a revival, and I'm like, God, I just don't want to deal with anything right now. I'm just so frustrated. But it's like, Bob's been kind to me. I kind of feel obligated. What difference is a few hours going to make? And I agreed to go. And the weird thing is driving there, watching the power lines as we're driving. I don't know if you ever done that as a kid and just watching them. It was just so surreal, just thinking, I'm not going to have to deal with any of this anymore when this is all over, when this day is over. I'm done. We get there and they're singing, and I said I grew up in and out of church. And about halfway through the first song, people talk about God talking to them. It's not this big, heavens open. It was my own internal voice, my own thoughts. And this thought would not leave my head. Over and over and over again, I heard, you tried everything else, it's all failed. Give me a chance. And I'd chase that thought away and it would come back. I'd chase it away, it'd come back. And in between the first song, right as they were finishing, they're getting ready to go to the second song, the pastor stopped the singing. And he said, I don't understand exactly what God's saying, but God's talking to somebody. And you've tried a lot of stuff. You've had some issues. God says, give him a chance. And it was almost word for word what I was hearing in my head.
Mm.
I hadn't cried from the time I was 18 and the time I'm 24. 6 years, not a tear. Too much anger. I couldn't connect with that part of me. As I started to walk up that aisle, that altar, something in me broke. God just broke something in me. And I hit my knees and I just started bawling. And I said, God, do you want this mess? You got it. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but you said that you would save me. You said that, okay, this is it. I'm asking you to come in my life. I'm going to give you a shot. Mm. And on my way out that day, all I knew is I just felt lighter. I felt like this big, something had been emptied. And somebody on the way out, one of the people gave me a handshake, and there was $100 in that handshake. I didn't say a word to anybody that I'm about to be kicked out. I'm about to be homeless. God had just put it on somebody's heart. And it was enough for me to survive for a week or two. And then somebody told me about a job at a local factory. It was just a temporary job, but I got it. And it was enough to survive, but it was a 45-minute drive each way. Yeah. And now I've got this big emptiness. You can't have a vacuum. You got to fill it with something. So I'm praying, I'm reading God's word, and I started listening to, and I know a lot of people don't like her, Joyce Meyer, because she had gone through a lot of sexual abuse in her childhood and had to forgive. Right. And Norman Vincent Peale, a few more or less positive speaker, motivational speakers like Tony Robbins when he was younger was actually onto some stuff. And just trying to find a better way of living. And slowly, God helped me rebuild. And then they closed the factory down, and they moved it to Mexico. And they opened up the door. They said, look, we can help with college. And I was like, well, I want to go back. But they said, well, we can't pay for a 4-year degree. You've already got your 2-year degree. But we can help you get unemployment for 9 months. That first year you're in school. Basically, we can cover your expenses along with what you'll get with financial aid. I jumped on it. I said, okay, God, this is my chance. And that first semester back, I went from flunking to have a 3.5 GPA. Mm. I graduated with 3.7 GPA from the time that I started back until, I'm not counting this one semester, but I had a 3.7 GPA. Got a job with the university, which gave me benefits to be able to get partially paid tuition as an employee. Got my master's degree. I'm the first person either side of my family. We were poor white trash. I grew up in a single wide trailer. I have a master's degree. We just bought a 2,500 square foot house. The difference that God has made in my life is just incredible. And sometimes I struggle with my faith. I know all of us do. But I know where I was. And I know what God did in my life. And I've gotten the chance to help so many other people simply because I can look at them and say, I understand. I may not understand exactly what they've been through, but I understand pain. I understand anger. I understand self-loathing. And I understand what a difference God can make in your life.
So tell us about, so you wrote a book.
Yes.
About all of this. When did you write the book?
I published it in 2016. I spent 3 years doing extensive research and then writing the book.
The book is Names Will Never Hurt Me, and the never is marked out. Names Will Hurt Me. And so tell us just a little bit about the book and how it can help people who may be struggling and maybe secretly struggling.
Well, according to research, the average person who is bullied, and I'm not talking one instance bullying because that's very common. 1 in 4 have at least one incident of bullying in their life. I'm talking the ones who are chronically bullied. It takes over 10 years, and they have lower cognitive scores.
Takes over 10 years to
just to begin recovery because they often hide it. Nobody ever knows about it. They don't even deal with it.
Is that what it took for you? Was it 10?
It was about 10 years to
Wow.
really start dealing with it. And I mean, well, it's about 8 years, yeah, for me.
So you got to get through all that mess in the 10 years to
Right.
be able to get focused.
To even start healing, and people don't usually talk about it because now, and nobody talks about it. It's like, okay, you were bullied. Oh, it's just part of growing up. Get on. It doesn't work that way. You still have the damage inside. But the thing is, if you're a child abuse victim, people are like, oh, well, let me get you help. I was a victim of bullying. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to say, hey, somebody cares. And I wrote this book. First of all, I put my story in there. It's very vulnerable. I put my story in there about what I went through in great detail. And, how I found my way back out. And God helped me find my way out. And then I wrote a lot of stuff that basically some of it is what you would call motivational speaking stuff. But you know what? They just found what God already said. Be more positive. Guess what? God says, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is a good report, think on these things. God said this thousands of years ago. They're just pointing out what God already knew. Okay, things like, I've got another one here. I actually wrote a couple things down. Monitor your thoughts. Learn to think about what you're thinking was one of the big things for me, is to stop thinking about all the negatives and just reinforcing and enumerating. To ruminate is basically like a cow chewing its cud, where it brings it back up and chews it, swallows it, brings it back. That's what ruminate really means. And that's what people do when they've been through trauma. They just sit there and replay it over and over and over again. I was really good at that. I had to learn to monitor my thoughts. And when my thoughts would start going back there, replace them. But guess what? God talked about that a long time ago, that you focus and you dwell on God. When you start going through stuff like that, replace it with a good thought. These aren't things, they didn't come up with these. God came up with this a long time before they did. And the big one for me, and that I tried to really talk about in this book a lot, is forgiveness is huge. It's not, and people misunderstand forgiveness. Forgiveness is not saying what they did was okay. It doesn't matter. No, what they did to me was wrong. I'm not going to ever say that was right. That was wrong. It was horribly wrong what they did to me. But it also doesn't mean that I just give them free rein to come and keep hurting me. Sometimes you have to put up boundaries. Mm-hmm. If these people are going to continue to come hurt you, sometimes you got to say, no, you're not going to do this anymore. And you got to put a stop and say, I want you out of my life. And I had to do that with a few people in my life. So, people misunderstand. But what forgiveness is first of all, releasing them from your right to vengeance. Scripture says, vengeance is mine. It's not mine, it's God's. Release them from your right to vengeance and make a choice to release them from your anger. This is one of the reasons I loved when I did listen to Joyce Meyer, is she had a saying that was actually, it's an older saying, nobody knows the author, that you having anger and hatred towards somebody else and expecting it to kill them or to hurt them is like you drinking poison and expecting it to kill the other person. It's not, these people were hours away from me. They didn't know I was hurting, but it was killing me. I had to let go and forgive. Forgiveness means, like I said, first of all, you're giving away your right for vengeance. You're giving that up. And you release them from any consequence. And you decide, it is a choice to release yourself from the pain associated with that. Now, as a Christian, the other side of that is give that to God. And people think it's instant. Oh, I forgive you. No, it is a process. Because you can make that decision, and 10 minutes later, that thought come back in your head, and you start thinking the negative thoughts. I wish about them. No, you chose to forgive them. Go back, revisit it. No, I chose to forgive them. God, I forgive them. And it doesn't happen overnight. But forgiveness was the key that opened the door. Mm-hmm. It really did. And a couple of those guys got saved. And I remember going back home, the last time I was home, one of them coming up to me, and he was almost in tears, asking for forgiveness. I said, Bob, I forgave you a long time ago because I needed to for my personal edification and my salvation. But thank you. And I actually gave him a hug. He's a brother in Christ.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And the change in that life is just amazing. And I said, but I did that. He just, kind of just wouldn't let it go. I said, Okay, I ask one more thing of you. Stop it with your kids. Make sure they know the damage that bullying can do and that it doesn't continue another generation.
Right.
Break that cycle.
That's good. That's good, and that's powerful. How about talk a little bit about like today? Do you still see effects of bullying on your life? Maybe not so much the bullying piece, but like you write about anxiety, you write about depression, you write about anger. I could see the anger, and you could see how you got worked through that. But what about the other two, anxiety and depression?
I still struggle with anxiety to this day. There's some things when they come in your life, you may never completely get rid of them. I still struggle with occasional depression.
So, like in the anxiety side, does something trigger it? Like something will trigger it for you here more in a recent experience, like maybe at
Well,
work or.
we had an instructor, I went to class for massage therapy, and I was in class 4 nights a week while working full time. One of the instructors kind of had a mean edge about her. In fact, I think she really needs to retire. And I normally don't put up with it. In fact, I had a reputation of if somebody starts in on me, or even especially, I cannot stand seeing somebody being bullied or put down in my presence. I will come at you. I will come at you in a godly, but I am not going to put up with that in my presence. And I went after a couple instructors because I felt like they were berating students. Like, you do not speak to them that way. And the same thing with me. I was just like, no, you're not going to talk down to me. Well, this one was intimidating. And from the day one, she kind of intimidated me. And every time I walked into class, was like this.
Like a kid again.
Yeah, like a kid again. Until she did something to somebody else. And I went off. And I did not have the most Christ-like reaction, I'm going to be honest. I was like, I'm taking her down. Because it was Tina. And Tina was working with someone, and you have to use your hands in a certain way and keep them soft. And Tina was doing something, she walked up and went, no. So she physically assaulted my wife. I wasn't in there because Tina's a year behind me. I went off. I went to the director. I said, either you handle this or I'm going to the massage board and I'm taking her license. And I said, then I'm going to go after her and I'm filing assault charges. I don't put up with it. I'm not. So the problem is my reaction was way over what it should have been because I had swallowed when she started on me. Where normally I just don't put up with it. I'm just like, no, I'm not going to put up with this. You're going to treat me as a human being because I deserve it.
So you buried that the way you were treated, coming in anxious.
Yep.
And so then when you see it in someone else, it's like, that's too far. That's
Yeah.
it. And you lose it and all that's there together.
If I'm not careful,
piled up.
It's just like boom. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, I didn't hurt anyone, but my intensity, the director looked at me like, oh crap. I mean, I'm going after her at this point. You touched my wife.
Yeah.
And Tina was a victim of abuse in her first marriage. She was physically abused by her first husband. You don't know what people have been through.
Right.
And now I still have some anger over that. I'm still dealing with that. I'm not there yet. Okay. So yeah, I was anxious, and just sometimes things get me. I'm just like this, and I'll get anxious about starting new jobs or anything, things that normally just life events, and I'll get anxious about them. And I have to work through that.
That's good.
And
I appreciate your honesty on that because, yeah, a lot of times you want to act like you licked it or you got it done. And it does. It's still a battle through your life. Even
Yes.
things that happened to you so long ago still become a battle today because they trigger things inside of
Yes.
you. Now, what's the depression side, though? Why would you go to anxiety or why would you go to depression? I see the anxiety in the classroom, but what about the depression?
Well, the depression is things that are often situational that would cause a depression anyway. But I want to go further. If I lose a job, instead of, okay, the economy was this way, I got laid off. No, I didn't perform well enough, and I take it all inside, and it's all on me, and it's my fault, and I'm a failure, and I want to go there. And that's a deep, dark, sucking hole that will just take me down.
And the rumination again, where you
Exactly.
ruminate it and you
So
can't
what did
stop
I
it.
do exactly? And then
Here it comes again, and I can't believe this.
The good news is I don't stay there anymore. And I'll give you an example. Again, going back to what I just did. 2 years of going to class 4 nights a week, and we're talking pathology, kinesiology, anatomy, physiology, very tough classes. I mean, it was intense. And when I got done, I graduated graduated in May. August 13th, I get my license. August 14th, I launched my website. And I've already got 3 massages that first week. And these are people that I'd been working on as practice clients. And then I went into depression.
It's like you were overloaded.
Yeah, I was just like, I could feel the adrenaline just leach out of my body.
Wow.
And, just like done. And I was like, I'm never going to make any money at this. Nobody's going to come to me on a regular basis. The ones that are there just feeling sorry for me. And I started just going down that hole.
Mm.
But I knew what to do. First of all, I prayed, God, I need your help. I don't want to go here. I don't want to. I'm doing too many good things in people's lives that you've helped me do. And I'm helping a lot of people. And that's my motivation now. My motivation is helping people. I'm like, I get to help a lot of people with something new. Now I have a physical way to help people. I've helped people that were hurting and they walked into the room and they couldn't even walk straight and they walked out, they were walking straight.
Mm.
That's an amazing feeling.
Great feeling.
I'm like, so God, help me get past this. But then I actually reached out. We have a program through my work where you can get free counseling for a little while. I reached out to a counselor. My counselor said, you were doing what for 2 years? Yeah, letdown is normal.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel this way a little bit. Don't go further with it, but it's okay to feel this way. And I had to embrace the negative feelings. Not an easy thing to do.
Yeah,
for me.
that's great. Hey, let me just say this. This book, Names Will Never Hurt Me, with the never crossed out, has got some great ideas. And I would encourage you to maybe pick it up. It's by Mark Stewart, Healing for Victims of Bullying. And especially if you've been in that area or you're dealing with situations where you have to deal with bullying, I think it'd be an excellent thing. And just some of the things you're hearing from him, it's like we call the show Let's Get Real. I'll tell you what, this is one of the most real we've had because he's just laid everything on the table. And I'm so grateful for that, for your honesty, just the way God's worked in your life. It really encourages me. And I've always admired that about you, just working through all of that. And yes, I don't like the fact you play tennis better than me.
I wouldn't say that.
but it's just, I've enjoyed the friendship and we're kind of out of time here, but why don't I let you take
quickly,
it.
just tell us quickly, if you today could tell 5th grade Mark one thing, what would you tell him? What advice would you give to people struggling with bullying?
That is a tough one, but people struggling with bullying today, first of all, you're not alone. Second, you have worth as a person. That the things they tell you are not real.
Mm.
And that third, you can find help. And I stopped reaching out for help. Never stop. Find somebody. Keep reaching out. Find an adult. Be cautious about who you ask, because somebody coming in there like a bulldozer and just like blah and blowing everybody out of the water, that's just going to bring repercussions on you.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the right adult, they're going to have quiet conversations and they're going to quietly work in the background to fix things. But you can't stop looking for help like I did. Don't just give up. Keep looking. And God loves you. God created you. Look at my life. I was going to commit suicide at the age of 24. I have a master's degree. I have a loving wife. I mean, Tina is incredible. I have people in my life who love me. I've got a church that's amazing. I've got people I played like tennis with that I love hanging out. You and Harold Simcox and some of the other people in this church that I love playing with and hanging out with. And I love competition. Now I love competition. My life is full. Don't give up. God has a plan for your life. Don't just give up.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Awesome. So is the book's available, right? If
Yes.
somebody wanted to get a copy of the
Amazon, you
book,
can get it on Amazon.com.
on Amazon.com, and we'll put that link up here too with this show. And I just want to say, our church has a lot of resources available to people who may be suffering from depression or anxiety or bullying or whatever. So check out tbcnow.org and visit the resource page, or check out some of our outreach ministries, and we would love to try to help you. We've got counseling here
Counseling center.
available.
Life support.
Life support counseling with Dr. Shannon Warden. So we've got a lot of resources. We would love to help you if you or someone you know may be dealing with this. So we thank you, Mark. It's been a great episode, and we're looking forward to the next episode. So like us or follow us, and share this episode if you like it.
Thanks for joining us this week on TBC Today. We want to connect with you, so make sure to visit our website, tbcnow.org, and subscribe, rate, and review the show in iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend, and be on the lookout for our next conversation.